that's why we're trying to get something to sustain.
You talking about the dog bill?
Yeah. Let's talk about that. Should we have a state dog?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, we are having another caucus tomorrow. We're going to talk about, continue our discussion on Medicaid expansion. We did have a conference call with HHS and CMS yesterday. We were able to ask them a number of questions and get some additional information that was helpful, considering who we were talking to. And I've, met with hospital folks in the last couple of days to see where they are. And so, yes, we work on this every day.
But you, with the call, for example, was there any decisions made or any okays given for any of the directions you want to move? Any progress?
We explored what other states are doing or have done and how that could be applied to Utah, and there are some fits there.
Such as?
Well, Virginia, and we talked about before, there's another, I can't remember the other state, maybe it was Wisconsin. So the federal government doesn't like to go where no man has gone before. They go forward by looking in the rearview mirror. And so we're saying, they're saying, well, we've not done that, or only one state's done that. And we said, well, why don't you approve that for Utah? And then you can say this other state and Utah have now done it. So we explored some of the Virginia, and we think some of the things that Virginia has done could be modified as a fit for Utah. They gave us some, excuse me, I don't know how much of the weeds you want to get, but we asked them some pretty direct questions about what can we do for caps? How do we exit? How could we exit Health to Utah, for example? What are the different options? And they kind of told us some, this is how they either tell you yes or no for the most part. They say, we're non-committal on that. Or they say, we're even more non-committal than we were on the prior one. And we even got up to a triple non-committal. And so, and they actually used the N-word about 2 or 3 times. So we actually got to know. And I thanked them for that. I said, thank you. At least they were able to give us a
What did they turn you down on?
One of the questions we asked regarding Health to Utah was the exit strategy. And we said, so this is what we asked on Health to Utah, a couple of things. Let's say we appropriated $78 million to fund Health to Utah. And then we hit that allotment of $78 million, and the enrollment's still growing or costs going up. Can we cap our appropriation, our dollar amount to $78 million by not letting any new people in? And they said no. And we said, but one of our struggles is uncertainty in the budget and the cost of this. So we said, then what are our choices? And they basically said, you can end the program. We've told your executive branch that you can end it. And we said, but if we end it, then we'll have 90,000 Utahns out there that we're taking coverage away from. Why don't you just let us maintain the coverage for them within our budget constraints, and then those people, at least those people, will be taken care of? And they said, no, we will not allow that. You basically have to end the whole thing. And
so no enrollment cap, basically.
What's that?
No enrollment cap. You'd have to stop the program.
Yeah.
If you reached a level you didn't want to spend further.
On the 90-10, that is correct.
Okay.
On the 90-10. They said you can exit and basically disband the whole thing. And we said, but that disrupts it, this disrupts lives. And they said, well, that's the answer to that.
So you have clarity on the enrollment cap on 90-10. Do you have clarity on enrollment cap on 70-30?
No.
Okay.
They admitted that they did an enrollment cap for Virginia on their current FMAP, which is, I think, 50-50. And they did enrollment cap. They said they don't like to do enrollment caps. And we said, well, you just did one 4 weeks ago. I said, we know what we don't like to do. And they gave us some other parameters of how effectively you can control your expenditures without a so-called enrollment cap.
So how does this affect what you're looking at? Are you looking at changes to Healthy Utah? Are you looking at changes to, what is it, Vulnerable Utah?
No, it's called Utah Cares.
Oh, Utah Cares now.
Utah Cares, that's right.
Good to know.
Utah Cares. And it's a great name. So we care about Utah. And so what we learned, there are tools, there are mechanisms, there are actually things we could do. They gave us some paths forward of how we could, if we're concerned about the uncertainty of the funding or the cost of full expansion like Help to Utah, we could do something on a smaller scale and maybe a phased approach or a moderate tempered approach. There are ways to do that.
Keeping it below to the 100%.
Yeah, something below 100% of poverty.
Are you gonna get something done this session with all of this uncertainty still?
There's still time. We're, as I said, we work on this every day.
We've only used half the session. We have a whole other half of the session to just deal with this only. Okay, so yes, we have plenty of time.
On another non-controversial topic, the religious liberty anti-discrimination bill, the NAACP is having a press conference about now, I believe, to say that the bill would, as it's written, Representative Christensen's bill would take away civil rights.
And you're here with us, I'm not there.
Oh, we have somebody there. Don't worry.
You have people.
We'll be in the paper.
This is
Okay.
actually the first I've heard of it, so.
So I'm wondering what your reaction to that is. That's a pretty significant organization to come out against. the
You know,
bill.
I think this issue, I suspect there are a number of potential bill sponsors or bills that will be coming out. Bills oftentimes go through amendments, substitutes. I think on an issue like this, if you were to see an original draft of a bill go unscathed, unamended, unsubstituted, I just think it's highly unlikely. And so I wouldn't hold a first draft of a bill dealing with this area of public policy and assume that that is what is going to make its way through the process. I think it's a highly charged issue. It's one that's difficult to pass by way of legislation, if history is any indicator. So I wouldn't get too exercised over what version is out there right now. I think that what is good about the process is there are a lot of people talking, and there are a lot of, I think, well-intentioned and sincere efforts being made to find a way to treat people in a non-disparate way, treat people the way you'd want to be treated. And that would encompass both our religious liberties as well as anti-discrimination.
Does it concern you that the NAACP though is speaking out on this as potentially impacting civil rights? We really haven't talked about civil rights as part of this equation.
Yeah, you know, if I could dialogue with the NAACP, it'd be, don't get wrapped around the axle on a first draft of a bill like this. I would say this to any colleague, anyone that would see that would be worried. I would suggest dialogue, reaching out, sitting down with the bill sponsor, and would hope that an organization like that would seek to dialogue with the bill sponsor and see what can be done. If there's issues out there on that bill, I do not think that the NAACP would be alone, and I think they can be part of the discussion on how to make a bill good policy.
But this is the only bill out there right now, I mean, the only one we've seen. Are you suggesting that this may not be the vehicle or the?
Yeah, I'm guessing Senator Urquhart and Senator Backus may have something on this topic. We may see other bills that surface, who knows? I mean, I know that there's a lot of discussion going on in Capitol Hill about this area of policy, and I think they're good discussions, and I think they're, but it's hard. It's a hard topic to delve into.
Today, Representative, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to ask if you still think that you're on track to getting something done on that issue.
We got plenty of time. There's plenty of time to do it all.
Keep telling yourself that.
Speaker Lockhart always said we got until day 45, right?
Today, Representative Hutchings officially rolled out his criminal justice reform package.
Yep.
What do you think about the ideas behind that, the premise of shifting from incarceration to treatment for nonviolent offenders?
You know what? These are reforms, I think, that in some form or fashion have been discussed before. We've looked at areas of policy where we can lower recidivism. We know that there's a frustration. I think Utah's prison bed or prison population has been growing. As you look backward and look at the way it's been growing faster than the national average. So with the discussions of moving the prison passed by resolution last year, now going through the effort of where to move that prison, it brought in a think tank like the Pew Foundation that looked at areas of reform that could be stared at or implemented if you're going to redesign a prison, if you're going to have new facilities potentially available, what could you do? It has spurred a great debate, and I think that the bill that Representative Hutchings has is part of that perfect opportunity that we have to get this right and to do a better job. And so I see the CCJJ reforms hand in glove with a redesign and a reconstruction of a prison. So I think it's a great thing.
Let's just do a couple more questions.
What about the premise though of lowering sentences in some cases that are felonies now to misdemeanors and focusing more on the treatment?
So what you got to be careful of is that you don't want to just say we're going to lower it to a misdemeanor and then send people to our county jails and let them, because you haven't solved anything. You've just shifted the jurisdiction somewhere else. I think that what these reforms do is that they don't just simply shift that to someone else, make it someone else's problem. They're actually looking at intervention and they're looking at ways to put people on a positive track. So I'm supportive of these reforms, and I think that the more that people learn about them and study these, I think there'll be universal support. You heard Senator Lee in his discussion about federal prison reform, talking about that recidivism rate and people that come and by statistics seem to turn right back around and find themselves incarcerated again. There needs to be a better way to approach this. And I think that if you read through Representative Hutchings' bill, I think that they have landed on some much needed reform.
You said you're going to spend the caucus tomorrow on Healthy Utah again.
We're going to spend it on Medicaid expansion.
Oh, on Utah Cares. Yesterday you had proponents, obviously, of Healthy Utah making their case. Are you going to have opponents making their case?
Well, tomorrow,
alternative cases being made?
We're going to talk about other options. And we'll have some discussion on Healthy Utah and on full Medicaid expansion, such as Healthy Utah, but we will also talk about other options tomorrow. So primarily yesterday was the focus on full expansion via Healthy Utah, and tomorrow will be on other options, but there will still be some discussion on full expansion as well.
And if I could add,
I was just going to ask if you expect to take a position tomorrow, or will it take another caucus for that?
We'll see. I think the Senate's had 3 caucuses on this already, and so we'll see where we get tomorrow.
Budget numbers are going to be out in a couple of hours. I know you don't know what they, well, maybe you do know what they are. I don't think you can tell us what they are yet. But sort of looking ahead, where do you anticipate this leaving you guys on the budget road? That makes sense. You guys, let me phrase it this way. This way I put it over in the Senate. You guys, the governor wants to take $100 million out of roads. He wants to take $10 million in cigarette taxes. You guys haven't done that. You want to put $116 million away. You guys are about quarter billion dollars apart at the outset. Are you guys going to be able to get to some of these places the governor wants to go, like the way the people unit increase and the education funding increase that he's proposed?
Representative Gibson, you've been so quiet. Look, I think your projections are going to be. I'll just say instinctively, if you look around, I think the economy is doing well. I think that we could expect the projections to come out and continue in that trend or that trajectory. It's important to note that the consensus budget numbers are different than the trend lines that we talk about. A trend line is really a budget tool. It's to say, of the ongoing money that you have agreed upon, executive branch, legislative branch, that is ongoing, is there an amount of that ongoing that you ought to stare at a little bit? And is it as dependable as all the dollars that you expect to come year after year after year? Because what happens is when you take those forecasts and you spend to the dollar, and if you're wrong, that's when you find those shortfall years. And they're inevitable. We have them. I've lived through a number of those cycles. So the way that I think legislatures in the past have tried to prepare for that is that they've picked some items that were ongoing, but you could retract from that with very little pain in the budget, whether that's I remember in one of the big surplus years, they had $100 million ongoing for transportation. Well, if you see a shortfall arrive, that's an easy one. It wasn't committed to bonding. It wasn't committed to something, and it was ongoing for transportation. If those dollars fall short, that's something that didn't hurt classrooms, funding to schools, health and human services. And so I think we've looked at this kind of this issue under different names and called it different things. I think we're just being a little bit more intellectually honest about above trend line growth and saying, let's just stare at that and make sure that we're not overcommitting taxpayers during economic cycles. So that said, we're paying very close attention to that. And I think that the governor's budget is, as a governor's budget would be, it's very aspirational. It's very ambitious. But at the end of the day, we've got to pay the bills. We have all these different sub-appropriation committees that go through a deep dive of each one of these departments and areas of responsibility. And it does come out different, you'll be surprised to hear, than the one that the governor comes up with at the beginning of the session. So I don't know that we marry at the end, Robert, on the same numbers and the same appropriations. I think there will be a difference. But I think it's like any other year. I think at the very end, we all come together.
Okay, last question.
If you've got more money though, as a result of these projections, and as you say instinctively, it looks like that'll be the case. Did you maybe go too far at the beginning of this session by recommending setting aside 160 million and asking everybody to make cuts up front?
Lisa, I want to live through an economic cycle where when we see the economy slow down, and it's not a matter of when, it's only if, I would like us not to have to cut. Everybody talks about rainy day funds. The first thing that we've done in the legislatures I've served in is when the shortfall comes, we don't immediately begin to take one-time money in a rainy day fund and bridge. We first cut before we get into rainy day funds to make sure we know the dip and how deep and how long. Well, I would like to be able to set a budget that if the economy were to slow down, the state of Utah still keeps its commitment and that budget stays intact. And I think that the more you stare at that above trend line and you're sensitive to it, the higher likelihood that the budgets you write are budgets that will be sustained, whatever the economy decides to do in the coming year, or 18 months, because it's an 18-month projection.
So that's a no.